that ability to make a choice for myself. So anyway, I felt like we reached a compromise, but I also got a chance to get in things that were important to me for our future.
Freaking awesome.
And he was, because I think the homeschool he was holding on to mostly because he thought that would be more convenient. And, but that wasn't what was really in the best interest of me and the kids.
No. Well, and that's the thing. Yeah. You're the only one that knows how it's affecting you, right? And so they might think it's convenient for them because they're not the ones doing it. And they have some idea of what they think life should be like. Usually that when people do that, they're fantasizing or they have some concept of what they think is right. And they don't care necessarily, or they don't have the wisdom to see where they're wrong.
Yeah, right? And the other thing
until someone like you comes out and says, this is going to compromise my psychological well-being, my balance in my life, there's a balance problem that your fantasy doesn't include.
Right, not at all.
Yeah, and so when you give them that feedback, first of all, whose choice is this? Is it theirs or yours? So you're positioning yourself to be constantly told what to do like a slave instead of taking ownership of what you're doing. So that had to have felt really gratifying for you to have a voice and to say, no, this is important to me and I'm not going to do this, right? That compromise around what works for you.
Yeah, that felt huge. And part of that, I almost had to sort of take myself completely out and then maybe maneuver back in with that. I'm not really sure because before it seemed really impossible for me to kind of have a voice. Anybody really listen to me?
Yeah.
But at least now going forward, and he just felt like he felt like in a way he was being a supportive husband, but he didn't see that the fantasy itself was the issue as well. So
right? Isn't that right? I know. So that's the thing is you got to see that there's some illusion of it's an ideology. It's an ideal. It doesn't mean that it's normal.
Yeah.
Makes sense. When I say normal, I mean balanced, realistic, within reach. If it's an ideal, even what I teach people, I can say, this is the ideal. Is it reachable? Not yet. Nowhere close. Like there's all this work that has to be done, right? Like the hunger scale. Yeah. Eat to the hunger scale. That's idealistic. If the person holds on to body image shit, that's idealistic to someone who's holding on to body image crap. For someone who doesn't hold on to body image crap, totally easy. Natural.
Yeah.
No work. No effort. Super intense effort for someone who's expecting thinness or fear of fatness. So you can see, well, you can hold an ideal in your head, but it requires a certain environment that promotes it easily.
Right. Yeah. And which it basically becomes isolating.
Totally. Isn't that the truth?
Most likely is the only way you're going to do it.
Right. And you'd have to be okay with that. Or in a position where it fits for the moment. And sometimes it does fit and sometimes it doesn't, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so awesome. So our last session really kind of helped process and stuff.
Huge, because I was really, kind of felt super stuck in a rut with that. So
can you see how some of this work requires that you go into these things that you're not addressing that are what's creating this urge to do something to compensate? Right?
Yeah. And I also, totally.
Yeah,
it's actually really interesting how it's so superficial, the whole layer, and
the body image
even
stuff.
Seeing certain patterns of mine that were kind of repetitive sort of patterns that I would almost wonder if it was almost like an obsessive compulsive, maybe a tiny bit sort of thing that, because I always would pick at my face. And I'm like, why am I picking at my face? But I feel like I always did that. And I think it was a stress reliever.
Yeah, nervous release.
I stopped doing it.
Mm-hmm. What it is it's because your body, when you're under threat. Okay, when you're in that state of I'm being threatened, and your whole body goes makes changes. The endocrine system changes ultimately to prepare you to work, to run, to fight, right? And so nervous energy like that is often a way to express that. It's like a feeling of doing something. Some people do it by cracking their knuckles, constantly chewing gum, like constant. It's a symptom, right? Sometimes you're just bored, but and you're trying to do something with your energy out of boredom. But ultimately, when you're under stress, right, you can say, well, that energy can come from a different foundational environments internally. When it's, again, stress induced, your blood sugar is higher, your adrenals are a little bit more active, you're more prone to, it's like walking on firecrackers, Yeah. And so picking at your face, finding something to fix is somehow kind of actually calming that energy that's coming. But you're not necessarily addressing why you're stressed, right? You're not looking at the source of that fight or flight or feeling of threat.
Right, because it almost is like you're quote-unquote normal, so you don't even...
You're coping. Yeah. So
question it almost.
You got
why
it.
Why are you even in this state?
I love it. I love that you just said that, because your coping mechanisms can create a sense of I'm okay. But why do you have to incessantly pick at your fingers and your face? Why are you having to get on, social media and check everything 50 times a day? So you're doing all that, and so you feel like you're normal or fine. Well, if we get rid of all of that picking and, anxious expression of energy, what do you have left? Oh, well, you have your shitty home life. Right? You have feelings of inadequacy. You have feelings like I can't do this anymore. I'm suffocating. There's the original threat. And sometimes people have more than one. I often work with people, it's a marital problem. They're underneath it all, they need to get divorced. And they're trying to lose weight as a way to express their anger or resentment. And they're projecting it onto the body that if I'm thinner, then I'll feel better about everything. Right? But see how that's a compensation for the actual underlying marital issue.
Yeah, I guess like a sense of control over something.
Well, you're trying to compensate. Yeah, you're trying to, because you're not willing to address the issue, because that might end in change. That might end in destruction. It might end in confrontation. Right?
Yeah.
So, like for me, as an example, I always use my goddamn self. Because I know it so well for myself. For me, the underlying issue was this identity in religion, right? And identity in my family. So if that wasn't an option, it's not an option. You can't compromise that, right? Because if you do, first of all, there's nothing. You have nothing. You are nothing. You have no identity underneath it all. So it feels like you're going to die, right? So don't look at that. That's dogma. Right? I talk about brainwashing and dogma. That's unquestionable truth given to you by an authority. So it becomes something that you're not allowed to look at. It stays hidden. Right? And so you go and you keep on trying to find another alternative. I want to feel better. Feel better. I needed to feel better. So you're constantly seeking alternatives to feel better.
Yeah.
Like maybe I need to look better. Maybe I need to pluck my eyebrows. Maybe I should stretch and do yoga. I'll do yoga. I'll be a yogi. I'll teach yoga.
Right. Yeah.
And then eventually you just get on antidepressants, because the chemical, it's like, don't do anything. Let's just give you a chemical coping mechanism to create a sense of balance, even though you're still living in an environment that might be toxic for you. Make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does. So
you can say, if I'm toxic in my natural environment, then I'm going to have to find a remedy outside of that to feel better. Right? If I'm toxic in my natural environment or my baseline, I'm going to have to find a remedy to make it more balanced. And so you're constantly seeking remedies outside of yourself, right? Outside of your environment. You're not looking at your environment that's toxic. That it might be a systemic issue.
Or trying to like fix the environment by...
But you're not looking at the environmental cause of the toxin. You're looking at, yes, you're trying to micromanage your laundry and your cleanliness, and maybe you're upset. It is obsessive compulsive, by the way. It comes across obsessive because it's a constant search for safety and calm. Can you see why then you would fantasize in your mind about this amazing family environment? Because that's what you want. You want that, right? But why is it that you don't have that naturally?
Yeah.
Where's the strain in your home environment that's toxic? And it may not be the actual environment. It could be your fantasy.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
so that's where a lot of people have a hard time. They're like, Robin, I don't have any issues. We make enough money. I don't have any disease. No one's sick. I don't have any problems. Why do I feel this way? Because you're toxic in your fantasies.
Yeah.
Your fantasy is toxic. Your belief system about it is toxic, and you're holding everybody to it. Now it sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I love that you brought that up, that I do this and it gives me a sense of betterment. But if you take that away, now you're in lesserment, right?
Right.
Yeah, now you're in, and then you're like, well, crap, how do I change what I'm not going to change? How do I fix what's not going to be negotiated? So by negotiating, and that's kind of where, it's like you got to look at your way of doing things and recognize the suckiness in it, where, and if it's you that sucks, you know what? If you're okay with that.
Yeah. Well,
then you're relieved.
I know one of the things that I feel like, well, and this kind of goes back to the pregnancy, which then it was like, okay, this family will now, let's just say he brings some relationship baggage. So now I'm going to help him clear his relationship baggage. We literally had a home that got 13 feet of water during Katrina and it had no baseboards or doors, not their ceiling missing. It was like an absolute wreck. And so I'm like fixing everybody else's stuff. Like I literally was like,
you're a rescuer.
I'll just help him heal his issues. I'll fix up the house. And part of that was because we had a child and now we have to like have this family. But I took on so much stuff that was
okay. You got to question why you are.
Why did I do that?
Correct. You got to question why you feel the need to rescue and where that comes from. Often when you look at rescuing, it comes from a place in you that feels like a victim. There's a victim position inside of you that feels like there's a sorry, pitiful story. And that pitiful, sorry, poor me story within you is actually having compassion for the same pitiful, sorry story in others. So that's a typical draw to it. But you have this idea that you're better, even though you're not underneath it all. You're just coping, right?
Right.
Look at me, I'm better with all my coping mechanisms. You think you actually have the ability to fix other people's issues there, but not recognizing that maybe, even if it is a physical issue, why is their attitude so shitty? Why are they so poor me? But you're not questioning that because you hold the same victim position, right?
Yeah.
So this is how people get sucked into the codependency drama triangle. Have you ever heard of that before, the drama triangle?
I have, and it's funny because really one of the things that I realized before I left was that if I feel like I'm a victim, it's because I choose to be. And I was like, and I don't have to continue to choose that position. And that was probably one of the biggest things that I was like, I have to go.
Okay, so question. Do you even know how to not choose to be a victim?
Well, no.
Okay, so you really need to question your thought. So that thought that you just...
like the thought, and then I was like, I'm just going to have to figure out what that means.
Okay, because that thought is memorized. You memorized it. I knew it when you said it. I was like, oh, that was a little bit of a memorized. Someone told her at some point, you're choosing. Well, yeah, you are, but do you even know how you chose to be a victim? What is it that creates this position of I am a victim? How do you choose not to be if you are believing and thinking from a position of powerlessness?
Right.
So so hold on a second. I don't want don't hold yourself to that. This is so common. I have some random belief. It's a choice. You're a victim, of course, but do you know how to not be? Because if you don't, then it's not a choice. It is basically you're being held captive by a way of thinking about things that you don't know how to stop thinking.
Right.
So you would hold yourself to some concept of it's a choice to be a victim without really understanding it and then have guilt about the fact that you're a victim, right?
Right.
So the key here for you is how does one position themselves as a victim? Do you know?
Well, I would think the whole fantasy, some sort of concept right there, because now you're almost making the deal with the devil. I mean,
you got it.
Strings attached. There's strings attached. Yeah.
You got it. There is an expectation. There is always an expectation. And there's two sides to it. There is an expectation that didn't work out well, and then there's always an internal sense in coordination with that of, can I adapt? Can I handle it?
Right, yeah.
So
totally
there's two sides. It's not just one side. You're correct. You're spot on with, well, there has to be a fantasy. You got it. And usually that fantasy is always biased with your level of capacity. So you have some expectation that is directly stemming from your inner sense of what can I handle. So often, for example, when you look at body image, for example, my expectations are this idea in my head because that's what I can handle. I can't handle what I have. Therefore, I'm a victim of what I have.
Yeah.
I can't handle the symbolism. I can't handle other people's response to it. I can't handle, so it always comes from a state of I can't handle lack, inability, a sense of, and this is where fear comes in. This is where fighting or fleeing comes in terms of a threat. A threat, if we really think about it, is something that you feel you cannot handle. Right? So what is it you can't handle? What is it you're afraid you can't handle? Because sometimes you're just afraid the possibility that you can't handle it. It's not necessarily,
And I think having 3 kids and not being as a single mom, I was like, I'm not going to handle this.
Yeah, well, look at what you've been handling.
Oh, look what I actually did.
Right? And it's like, you're so scared of that, not what you're doing. I remember that awareness in my own self. Like, I'm so scared of being overweight, but I'm not afraid of what I'm living in that's worthy of suicide. Which one's should I be more afraid of? My current situation, which is very dangerous. I am walking around death at all times.
Right.
Or gaining weight.
Right.
Diabetes.
Yeah,
it's so ridiculous when you look at it.
Yeah.
Yep. What it's
on, and that's that belief system. Now I see how it ties in, of course, because what societies, and then
and really what it comes down to. You are afraid. It could be, if you go underneath it all, I'm afraid of being seen as inferior. I'm afraid. So when I break this down, and what I believe this stems from is that the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's the 3rd hierarchy. It's the one where we are relating to others as pack animals. We have this hardwired desire to feel lovable. It's hardwired in me. It's hardwired in you. It's hardwired in anybody listening to this. Okay, now there's a difference between me and you at the moment. What is the difference?
Well, I think you have understanding, like true, actual, working understanding of the pieces. So
I don't even know if that's right or wrong because I don't even know. Okay, but here's what I do. Here's what I do know.
Okay.
I am independent in my sense of lovability. I don't need anybody to validate me. I would because if I need someone else to validate it, I can no longer access freedom from survival mode because I am reliant on others to secure that feeling within ourselves that is wired to want to feel lovable. So I have taken full 100% responsibility to check that box, and it's unconditional. So I have at some point took that survival need, and secured it in relation to all opinion. That's why I can write a book and not give a shit if I get a 1-star review. I just don't care. I don't need, and not only that, but then you read positive feedback does not matter to me.
Yeah.
Right? Because I literally am self-reliant when it comes to my sense of lovability. And the other part about it is because you can be self-reliant with it. And attach it to a social ideology. You can say, but Robin, I really don't care what anybody thinks about me. It's how I think about myself. Well, what standards are you holding yourself to? And this is such a killer conversation that the social scientists are looking at around body image and eating disorders, is that once someone internalizes this concept of thin supremacy and beauty as their own, they think it's themselves, that it's their self-esteem. No, you just want, it's not a person that you're afraid of. It's a belief system you're now compromised by. So a lot of people who have had a lot of trauma, molestation, rape, being beat up, family attack, where there's tons of toxic relationships, they tend to stop using other people's opinion and they glom onto belief systems like religious systems because it's their own. They're the ones who are controlling it, even though it is a belief system given to you by a group of people, right? So do you see how it gives you it's like a coping mechanism around trauma, person-to-person trauma, is to actually say, well, okay, I'm lovable because I'm thin, because I'm smart, because I'm successful. So do you see how now you're holding yourself, you are your biggest abuser because you're holding yourself to these fantasies.
Yeah, I can see that. It seems like a lot of people have the orthorexia or whatever.
Yes, that's around food. Yep, they are super fearful of toxic food, and that is absolute survival mode with the first hierarchy of need, which is your food is not safe. And orthorexia is, I love that you just brought that up, is also that third hierarchy of need because they have this concept of self-supremacy with the belief system of what they're doing.
Yeah.
So it is an eating disorder, right?
Yeah.
It is obsessive compulsive, and it is very much narcissistic in the fact that people think they're so superior in their clean, pure eating, and anybody else who's eating dirty is so dumb. Oh my God. How dare they feed their kids that crap?
Right.
That's that supremacy within your own self-concept. That right there. So you may not be afraid of what other people think, but you're holding yourself to that. The goal of feeling lovable is now held hostage by a belief system you are holding yourself to. This is where it gets really bad. That's where it got bad for me. So what they found, one of the theories, is that as people in the United States is leaving this kind of old concept of religion, the more rigid, the more fundamentalism, the radicalism of Christianity in the United States, they're leaving it because it clearly has its downsides, right? They're transferring it to body image because it gives people a sense of self-control. I'm not vulnerable to someone else's shitty opinions. But because they don't know any other way to think. They've been radicalized. Their brain is super fight or flight. You need, you can't, you're bad, you can't, have something. And so their sense of having something is body image. And that's what I did. I didn't know it. But I went, whoop. Yeah. Right? And it became my own religion. My personal religion.
You can see how more and more people are just this radicalized sort of in whichever way they choose, but it becomes their own religion kind of thing.
Correct. And it gives you a false sense of lovability it's an illusion that you love yourself, right? We could actually say you're no longer dependent on on people, but now you just transferred it to a system. The benefit of that is there is some, you're taking responsibility to some degree, right? So we could say, well, it's a step in the better direction. You're still potentially,
you
in the
feel
same,
like a free agent,
but you're not. Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that you just said that. You do, because it feels good. It actually feels really liberating because you're taking care of yourself, but you don't realize you're actually not. You're using a system. You're holding onto a system now that you've internalized and can't see straight. So that's why I call thin supremacy, it's like body image religion. You have got to see it that way. People worshiping the idol of body image. There is the idol of body image in relation to some concept of disease-free, health-free, right? It's the worship of sexual attractiveness. You've got to see it as it may not be this a structured concept that, like what you've been doing, the worship of education in the home. What is that? Is that a religion? Did it get, where people idolize it as if it's superior to others?
Right, yeah. And people just tend to do that. Yeah, I guess it's it's the mechanism that itself is what needs to be why people
do that. Yeah. Agreed, because we could sit here. You got it. It's why they're the narcissism that's in it. It's the narcissism, because you and I can sit here and go, there's so much great things that come out of religion. There's so much lovingness, grace, but that isn't religion. That's human nature. It just creates some structure for some people that need it. I don't think it's a bad thing. It's the radicalism. It's the narcissism in it. It's, and ultimately, who am I to say that that's wrong, because it served me a good purpose. Mm-hmm. Here I am. How did I get here? It's learning to wiggle what it means to be really strict and tight, and maybe there's some benefit to that, and what it means to be loose and elastic, and what the benefits and what the downsides to that is, and how do you play both strictness and looseness, right? To where you're constantly in a state of you're in a higher level of consciousness.
Evolution,
correct.
Evolving.
Well, it's the animal brain. It's the animal need to control and hide and fight and defend.
Yeah.
And how do you move around it? I like to visualize this. Like, how am I sitting here? I have an animal brain. I have all of those mechanisms in place. And I can feel when they're engaging, right? And I have to recognize that and make fun of myself in a loving way. Like, I'm so animalistic, come down a little bit. And how to keep yourself in this space of ease. And it really comes down to staying vulnerable, willingness to die at all times so that you don't have to worry about it. And being humble in this fact that you're no different than anybody else out there. I'm no different than anybody else. Everybody else is wired just like me, and I'm wired just like them. The only difference is I'm starting to learn how to stay in this space where I'm floating and I'm not gripping, holding on, I'm just floating.
And I realized the other day, probably the first time in conversation, I actually said that I was feeling vulnerable because instead of just immediately tensing up, sort of.
Yeah.
And that kind of reminds me a little bit of that vulnerability, that sense of that,
Yeah, think of it like this.
Tensing.
Mm-hmm. So think of it like this. Imagine you're in the ocean, and we could sit here and go, okay, your goal is to float on the ocean. Well, imagine we've created a vacuum or an isolated environment where there's no waves. You're experiencing no waves, and you're floating.
Yeah.
And you're like, look at you. You're like an amazing floater. You're like so good at floating, right? Okay, well, how well are you going to do when that isolation is gone? And all of a sudden there's movement, and your sense of well-being was completely flat. No pressure, nothing. Mm-hmm. You're probably going to tense up.
Yeah.
Right? And so
I like that image a lot. Yeah.
Well, you're going to tense up, maybe sit up, feet go down. What's your likelihood of drowning at that point? really high. Okay, so you know,
and you fatigue because you're gonna start treading water.
You got it, and you're fighting waves, right, that are coming at you, and so you go, well, oh my God, the waves are bad. We need to stay in isolation. Well, in isolation, you're never really learning how to float. So like, it's like a false sense of capacity. You're inflating your sense of capacity because there's no trial. Don't do it.
You know, that actually reminds me, because it is very interesting. My dad is actually planning on retiring on the coast, and he probably won't be very far from where we'll relocate. And when I first thought of it, I had the resistance. And then I was like, no, the best way to do this is to actually face it head on with the sense of compassion and understanding. And that way, I guess when it comes or whatever, it would pass through me, let's say, or not, where I can tense up. And I was like, well, I can't avoid this. This is happening possibly sometime in the future, unless my dad changes his course. And he typically is very much stays a course. He's like very militaristic, sort of. Like, this is his retirement plan he's had in place for a long time.
Don't you want him to do what he wants to do?
Yeah, exactly. And it just, that sense of realizing I was hanging on to things in the past. I can work through my own issues by reflecting on it in a new light and practice.
And having some boundaries. Sounds like you might have had boundary issues in the past with your father.
Yeah, I definitely need to work on the boundary issues.
Yeah, because if you have boundary issues, there's what's there to be vulnerable about?
Right.
Nothing. Because you're never going to do something outside of your comfort zone. And if he's a victim of that, that's his problem, not yours. He needs to find someone else that'll enable. But at the same time, is there a compromise around I'm willing to help my father as my father? Anyways, back to this concept of floating on the ocean. So, and then there's an alternative that says stay in the waves, stay in the waves, stay in the waves. Well, eventually, you don't really have calm and peace to enjoy everything. Right? So we could say the goal is that you can enjoy peace and you can accept waves. You can enjoy peace and you can accept waves. You can live in all those environments.
Yeah.
Make sense? So just because it's peaceful doesn't mean there's something wrong with it. It's the ability to adapt in all situations, in all waves that come up. Can I adapt? So the question you have to ask yourself underneath it all is, well, the possibility of dying is always there, right? Because that's really where everything is wired in fear of, in avoidance of. Every single thing in our animal brain is wired to avoid death. So when it comes down to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, everything that he found and studied in our behavior is ultimately to avoid death. Death by starvation and lack of water is the most important. That is the most vulnerable every day, all day long for the rest of our lives, ultimately, right?
Yeah.
Death by lack of environmental safety, right? Not having proper clothing, freezing in the winter. Yeah. And then the third one is death by shunning, which is you're more likely to die on your own in the wilderness, period. End of story. Because it's harder to get food and water. It's harder to get shelter. It's the access to food, water, and shelter with another person is much higher.
Yeah.
Cohabitating with other animals. We have learned that having an animal like a dog is hugely beneficial to survival. Their hunting skills, their gathering skills, they're providing animals that they hunted and brought to you like, oh, I have something to share. They're amazing, right? We have evolved this way, and it's all in prevention of death. So we have this response hardwired into us. If you're judged and shamed, you're going to die. So
okay, that's interesting. And I actually like the way you related the Maslow's to death.
Oh yeah, that's the key. I mean, what do you think survival mode is? What is it really about? Death. Dying, and this what I love studying is the idea of death is very specific to that I will not exist. That there is this concept of me that you're aware of, and that concept of me becomes your survival mode. That's called the ego, who I am. It's this concept of who you are that is surviving. I studied Dr. Hawkins. He says it's the me, the lowercase me. Okay. Whereas once you come out of that, you have to kind of break out from this concept of me surviving to there is a me experiencing this, but it's way bigger than that. Way bigger than me. Beyond me. And the only way to experience beyond me is to be okay with death. To actually reconcile death. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you're going to hold on to this lowercase concept of ego me.
Mm-hmm. And how do people find that they become, like, at peace with the whole concept of death? Like, what are the ways?
You look at it. All you got to do is open yourself to what it is, what it will be like. For me, it took a near death. It took a choice to commit suicide and to face it head on because it was a real decision. That changed everything for me. You know, it opened me up to real awareness that I think I was guided to experience for sure. Because I didn't have, you know, outside of my dad who was there to help me, I'd already decided to commit suicide. And I would have to say it's actually going into what death is and the end of me. When you die, you're going to let go of the body and this identity and how you identify by it, and the whole concept of you goes.
Yeah.
That's what death is. And to face that, it just disarms everything. It disarms everything. And the question I came down to when you go down is, what is life? What is this? What is the point? You know, so these are typically concepts that you hear in, you know, spirituality. And what is spirituality? You know, who am I? What am I? You know, that's what you have to start going into. Is if I were to die, go through the grieving process, go through what it would feel like to let go of this life that you've experienced and what you called yourself and this concept of yourself. Think of how many things you've attached your identity to that have nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
This concept of a homemaker, the concept of a stay-at-home mom, those are concepts.
Yeah.
For me, it was this religion. That was a big one when I went through this because at the time I was 20 and it was just a big deal, you know.
Yeah.
Where I am at as a sibling, a family member, who I am as a daughter, you know, what is the point as an athlete? What is this body really worth? What is it that I need from a body? What is it really that I need from a body? And if I were to go through life again and have another family and have another toxic, you know, all this bullshit, what is it that I really need? Do I really need the family environment to be perfect? No. Why can't I just exist in it? And so I realized I don't need anything to change. I just need to float on my back in all of it. Why can't I just go limp? Why can't I just let it be? Because if you can let it be, right?
Yeah, then a lot of it's just going to pass.
Yeah. Let my parents do what they're doing. Yes, let my family be in this religion. Because I'm the only one that's really aware that it's not good for me. And if they don't have that, then they should do what they want to do. I don't care. You know, why do I gotta care? Why do I gotta care if you want to put your kids in, you know, in freaking public school or not? Why does it matter?
Right.
You know, because you can assume whatever they're doing, it comes from their heart. They think it's the right thing to do. That's what you should do.
Mm-hmm.
You know? If you don't have the foresight to see this or that, that's okay too, because maybe that's not important to you. One way or the other. If I don't have the foresight and I'm just letting my kids, you know what I mean? It's like, who gives a shit? Just let it happen. And so in order to do this, you have to have you have to be okay with death to get there. You have to transcend the animal brain to get to this ease. Because you know what? If you're afraid to die, are you going to go limp when it's time to float in a huge snow?
No, that's funny. And I actually can see how whenever I let go of the traditional religion system, and then I sort of found sort of that new aspiration, which for me was sort of like the pineal gland activation, like this is it, because otherwise I'm going to be this disincarnated ego. I didn't reach enlightenment. I have no idea what the hell is going to happen to me for the rest of my eternity. So like I have got to get this transcendence thing like on my way.
You just transferred it.
But then like you have to eat a certain way, of course, because then if you
it just becomes a new religion.
Vibration foods, and then of course you're gonna like eat cake or something.
Yeah, well, the funny thing about that is that really how that sounds like it's constantly outside of oneself. It's outside of it.
Right. It ended up when you're not in the right, like you have to settle to be okay with where you are in the journey, so that you're not.
Well, maybe it's natural. It's not unnatural.
Yeah, it's a natural process, right? So I did actually kind of get to that space where like this is a natural process. The slower you go, the faster you get there. You know, this is where I am right now. This is exactly where I need to be. I'm right where I need to be. So,
yeah. Well, what I'm describing to you is out the bottom. We're gonna go out the bottom.
Yeah.
That's like we're going straight to death.
Yeah.
Go down. But I also think too, for you to be attracted to the work that I'm doing, and for it to connect for you, that's really your only way out at this point. You might have made some weird contract with the devil. And the only way you're going to get out is about the bottom. There is no transcending. There's no transcendental shit going on. That's going to take, I don't know, 5 more lifetimes. Who the fuck knows?
Right.
Either way, if you can surrender to non-existence, so what it really is it's letting go of the concept of yourself that is a lowercase s-e-l-f. To open yourself up to non-existence, existence in the infinite space of possibility. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes any sense. So there is no concept of me anymore separate than you. We're all the same. Yeah. It's just we're all wired with these mechanisms. I'm wired with them. The difference is I am no longer afraid to die. Don't have a concept of me that I'm holding on to. Mm-hmm. It's, of course, I'm aware that there is a me experiencing, but I don't think it's any different than the sense of you that's experiencing. Same witness. Mm-hmm. Right? It's just getting rid of the blocks, right? Get rid of all these blocks. Yeah. Of fear, which is usually a block is a fear of death. Ultimately, it's some type of symbolism underneath it all that says I'm afraid to die. I can't handle it, which comes down to fear of death, right? If my children die, I can't handle it. Well, ultimately, what you're saying is there is no life without your children, which is death.
I see.
See what I'm saying? Everything correct.
Some concept.
You got it, of who you are as a mother. That's a concept of self, right? Remember what I said? There is you identify, you create, when you're in the survival brain, it's advantageous for you to create edges and boundaries between you and others, right? Mm-hmm. There is a concept of me that is special. I put quotes around that. I'm special. No, you're not. That's an illusion. You're in your survival mode if you think you're different.
Yeah.
Because you're trying, that difference feels safe. That's what it does. It creates, it's called the state of duality. Me or you, this or that. The goal is to remove as much gray area as possible. It's a way for us to evaluate our environment for safety and danger. And when it's with other people, Like, humans are dangerous. So typically someone who's been hurt by their own tribe or by other people tend to do this really kind of radically. So you can look at religion and go, oh, that's just a radical way for people to differentiate themselves from other humans. It's a human-to-human form of threat.
So, yeah.
Fascinating. Isn't this fascinating stuff?
It really is. Yeah, it really is.
So back to you. If you look at what you've been doing, you might have done it in this concept of what the role is of you as a mother. What's your role as a wife? It sounds like a very gender-oriented problem.
Yeah, and I really, well, I mean, I don't even, yeah.
Was your dad very patriarchal? Was your father very misogynistic or patriarchal?
Yeah, I would, absolutely.
Well, that's the generation.
Yeah.
Years and we could say this millennia generation.
He especially was critical of mothers. Like he said, his mother was a bad mother. My mother was a bad mother.
Well, here's the victim. There's the victim position.
So
poor him. Poor me. Poor me. And then his. Yeah, it sounds like it. Oh my God, we just totally hit the nail on the head with this one. It sounds like your father's attitude. So you're being held to some weird fantasy of what your father thought a good mother was, all in his own narcissism and lack of love and grace for his own mother, holding his mom to some concept.
Right.
Not seeing her as a human being trying to survive,
Yeah, and that's the way his dad
10 Commandments, dearie.
As well.
Listen to me. I'm about to pull up some religious stuff. 10 Commandments here. Honor thy father and mother. And that's, how do you do that? Well, you give them grace. They're doing the best they can with what they're wearing.
Yeah.
So you need to give your father some grace.
Yeah.
And just go, oh, well, that poor guy has unresolved childhood perspective shit. And you're being held to it.
Yeah, when my parents got divorced when I was in freshman year of high school, and they didn't fight ever in front of us, so it was a complete surprise. And then the next surprise was, well, we're not going to make it an ugly divorce if I get Melanie and my mom can have the other two sisters. So I get isolated with my dad, basically, because of course I say yes. And that turns out, I think that's where I may have developed, I'm sure, some of that battered wife syndrome.
Yeah.
I pretty much was made to feel like a sorry excuse just for even being alive, like if I made mistakes, because he's very clean and rigid.
Well, you realize that was his way of loving you, because he loved you that much. He wanted you to be successful in his rigid concept of who you are. So I want you to know that rigidity, just imagine he's trying to create no waves in your life.
Okay, right.
You see that?
Yeah,
that's real. He loved you so much. It's backwards, super backwards. But that's what religion was in my family. It was like, you need to keep this so calm and crisp and clean that you don't ever find a wave. Not realizing that what you just did was make me susceptible to a tiny little droplet of movement.
Right.
Now it's a catastrophe. And I suck. I couldn't even handle a drop. And it comes across like you're a piece of shit. You can't handle shit. You know what I mean? It's not intentional.
Right.
This awareness came to me in an out-of-body experience. So this is complicated, but if you just saw what I just said, it can be very relieving to go, oh, you love me so much. So much.
I'm very glad we're having this conversation.
Like, so much, it was horrible. It was backwards.
Yeah.
It's like he tried to put me in tiny little space.
And then completely rejected me when
you couldn't handle it.
Wasn't able to maintain that.
Correct. So imagine you're raising your kids in a very rigid religion that you believe is the right thing to do. It's the most righteous thing to do. It's the most important thing to do. You're protecting your kids. You're protecting them from the hostile reality out there.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
What happens when your child goes out in the hostile environment that you shamed and told them not to go? Don't do it, and they go do it.
Right, yeah.
You feel like you failed as a parent.
Yeah.
You feel sad. It's like it's a hard thing to experience for someone that doesn't know really what it is out there. So, and you probably took it personal. And, again, it's like, especially when I know that the religious indoctrination, it is with this narcissism of superiority. And so if your father, for example, is a religious radicalist, took pride in it and thought it was
right,
and you leave it, how do you think it makes him look? Like a bad parent.
Right.
And I think the old way of doing things was kind of to shun. That's like loving your kids. Shun them in love. Don't talk to them ever again.
Mm-hmm.
As if that's loving. A lot of religions do that.
Okay. Yeah, that was sort of an interesting position to take at the end of the day, because who really does that these days?
Oh, that generation does, and that generation that taught it to their kids does. I mean, there's a lot of people who are so afraid to come out of the closet, really, as a normal human being, or what is it?
Right, yeah, and I do actually sense that, but sometimes in me just that, like, oh my gosh, I'm just normal. Like, how bad is that?
It's so bad. You're a real person.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to have to you have to see him too. And this was something I realized is that if going through the process of dying at the time, I knew that if I had committed suicide, it would be so traumatic for my mother. Not my dad. For some reason, I knew my dad was going to be fine. My siblings would be fine, but it would have killed my mom, killed her. I just knew that she was unaware of that. In her mind, if I were to have left the religion, it would have killed her. Not realizing that if it were a matter of me dying, she would rather me leave the religion. The lesser of the pains.
Right.
She was unaware that there was something worse. She just was freaking clueless. Lost sight of reality. And all she saw was religious boundaries. Right?
Yeah.
And so it made sense to me why, if I was going beyond that, why she would be so fearful, so scared, so rejecting of it. Nothing to do with me. It was it was projected onto me. Her lack of awareness and how to function. And fear of the worst case scenario. Again, imagine your child's going out into the ocean and you just train them to stay in the space where there's no movement ever. Right? Yeah, you need to do some healing there, because I think what'll happen for you is you won't take it serious anymore. You're going to see him as like retarded.
Right, yeah. Actually, this conversation, when I think
special needs. He's special. He's special, and he really does love you, and it's projected through this tiny little straw. Still love. That's still love. It's sweet. He doesn't know any other way.
Yeah.
So you just can't take it personal. You just got to be like, oh, well, I'm not a victim. For him.
Yeah. And leaving, good Lord. Like, every small step of freedom feels so massive when you come out of such a small space. So even just, like, choosing a home instead of it being, like, kind of chosen for me in a sense.
Oh, totally. I so relate to what you just said. I so relate.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. Even just choosing what clothes you want to wear. What do I want to wear?
Yeah, like my hair. I've always kept my hair long, and because everybody else says, and I've never really done anything with my hair, and I don't even know if I guess I've convinced myself I like long hair. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have to question that since you people can convince themselves. But,
well, does it really matter?
I even do something besides, like, I did dreads one time for a few months, but other than that, it's all, I've never, like, given myself that kind of permission. And then I'll feel bad as if, like, well, why can't I do that when everybody else is in 2018 doing all sorts of fun things with their hair? And then you see how you can swing all the way.
Well, you gotta wonder if it does it matter. Yeah, I shaved the sides of my head, and it looked good. I thought I liked it, but you know, it was pretty fugly growing out. I don't know. You just don't take yourself so serious. So whether you do or you don't, doesn't really be indifferent about it all. Just have fun with it. Who cares? Just don't attach to some concept of or identity with it, right? Nothing's really changing whether you have this hair or that hair. Nothing changes. Yeah, you're just having fun with the life that you're living, your hair and whatever it is. Don't take yourself so serious. Does it really matter? If it doesn't really change this concept of the uppercase me.
No, because I think that's that concept of the tunnel vision, where then you're like, oh, I'm stepping out of the tunnel, or there's like this small area I have to live in. If you go outside that area, so then.
Yeah, that's lowercase me. That's like a concept of me.
Right. Yeah.
That's an idea of nature and natural, and I want to project out on the world that I don't give a shit. If you're going to do that, you probably actually do care. You know?
Yeah.
It's a matter of, what does it matter? So if it's fun, if it's something you want to do just for, then do it. Just don't let yourself attach to the identity of it or some concept of it or to other people's opinion about it here or there. You got to not care. One way or the other. It doesn't matter. It doesn't really change things. It's an illusion if someone thinks it does. Like I shaved my head and all of a sudden I'm a different person. No, you're the same person.
Right.
You are not the body. You're not your hair. You're not your eyes. You're not your skin. That's a physicality that is spontaneously occurring. You have nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, it is neat to how it all ties in together.
Right, well now we're talking about death and then rebirth. Who are you really?
Yeah.
Get down to the baby. Get down to that, where there's infinite possibility, and why can't you just stay there? But now you're self-aware around the animal aspects of your brain. In the animal wiring, you just transcended it. And the only way to transcend it is to be comfortable dying in any way.
Yeah. And I wonder, too, like, a part of, like, I'm doing a lot of documentation and sort of, like, scrapbooking form. And I guess I'm doing that as a way of getting closure, but also there's that wanting to capture the moment. And that, to me, somehow relates to death, because there's that sense of the fact that time keeps moving, and you want to, like, savor one thing, so then, or the floating in the ocean, like, letting it pass. There's sort of...
Yeah, so you're hitting something you need to contemplate on what that's about for you, or what are you afraid of? There's an aspect of fear in there you think you're recognizing.
Yeah.
All right, my dear, I gotta go.
Okay.
I'm gonna